Adam Butler is an intentional investor out now on Epsilon Theory YouTube. We talked about how he first got into Dungeons and Dragons as a kid, how he bullied his 9th grade science teacher, the 11th grade French teacher who takes an interest in him and quite literally changes his life. It's pretty remarkable. How he was almost a thespian partway through college. Adam Butler, the thespian. Can you imagine this? And of course, this bus ride to his honeymoon, how it alters his career, where he meets his wife, where he meets his business partners. Guys, there's so much here. You're going to love this story. Jack Forehand, roll some clips.
There was a guy who came to my school in grade 6 who loaned me his version of The Hobbit, which I then stole from him, like a really old version with like a gold cover on it. I never gave it back to him in the end. I still have it on my shelf. And he organized like a basic Dungeons and Dragons game with 3 or 4 of us. And I really enjoyed it. I had absolutely no caution or reservation about being a prick. So I had teachers that I think enjoyed me a little bit. I had a lot of teachers that found me very frustrating and annoying and probably would have preferred if I wasn't in their class. I wasn't particularly gifted in French, but I had a French teacher who took a liking to me and suggested that I start looking around at potential scholarships to schools in Ontario and Quebec. My mom and dad, they were both supportive. So I did drama biology for a term and realized that the drama people were also not my people. And anyways, I went through 2 or 3 different kind of stepwise transitions like that and finally settled into psychology. And I nearly didn't get through 3rd year art psych because there was an applied stats lab. On my honeymoon, my wife and I had met on the bus from the plane to the resort. We had met this other couple flying in from Canada, and we had hit it off. And it turns out that he was from a very wealthy family in Western Canada.
Welcome to The Intentional Investor with Matt Zeigler, where he and his guests explore the intersection of investing and life, portfolio and purpose. Nothing in this podcast is investment advice. Nothing in this podcast is advising you to buy or sell any security or to do anything with your money. Seriously, you should only act on investment advice from someone you know and who knows your unique situation. We are not that person. Matt Zeigler is a managing director at Sunpoint Investments, and the opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Sunpoint Investments or of Second Foundation Partners. Securities discussed in the podcast may be holdings of Sunpoint Investments.
You're watching The Intentional Investor right here on Epsilon Theory YouTube. This is the show where we talk about where portfolio meets purpose, aka where I talk to finance people about everything else that matters besides finance. I'm your host, Matt Zeigler. Who's with me? Really, how can I introduce this guest? The Madam Butterfly of finance, obviously. A real Pacini, this one. And his Chocho-san moments might also be his frying pan to the face moments in some parlance, where he'll tell you it was the tech bubble and the global financial crisis and how that changed how he thinks about life, how life will smash your idealized visions of it to pieces. It's unrequited love all the way down, I like to think. From the future that doesn't need us to the AI bots and everything in between. And I want you to note, I didn't make you Pinkerton in this, professional courtesy, but of course. Another persona, I'm going with Alfred, as in Batman's butler of strategy consulting. You might be able to get into this one. He's one man above ground, another variation below in this bat cave. You see the resolved CIO Adam carrying a serving tray of investment options in the world. But do you know how deep this man's mysteries knowledge goes? Do any of us know why he doesn't don the cape and cowl, but stacks them up for others? We're all but his humble Batman, I think. And last persona, which... This is an interesting one. We'll see how you go with this. I'm going with Star Butler, which is one half Starbuck from Battlestar Galactica, and the other half actual Starbucks for the coffee reference, because sci-fi and coffee go hand in hand. Obviously. Enough small talk. Let's dive in. I have Resolve Asset Management CIO, Mr. Gestalt you himself, Adam Butler. Welcome to the show.
Matt, wow. Okay. Yeah. That's quite an intro, man. If we're going to cover all that territory, it's going to take us a while. So,
it's going to take us a minute.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Buckle up your belt. I need you to order this for me first. And whether it's Madame Butterfly or just opera in general, let's get If you had to stack rank opera, Batman comics, Battlestar Galactica, and Starbucks coffee, what order would you prioritize those in?
Probably Batman, opera, Battlestar, and Starbucks.
Okay, fair enough.
I'm just impressed with my ability to remember four things at once now. Like that was kind of a memory test for me. So I feel proud of my results.
This is half the battle. Are you now? I know you're a music and arts person. Are you at all an opera person? I have no idea about this.
Well, I grew up in a small town in Eastern Canada, and we didn't really have much opera growing up. I've been to the opera in several Canadian and U.S. cities over the years, but I wouldn't call myself like an opera aficionado by any stretch. I enjoy opera when I have a chance to see it, but I don't typically seek it out.
I love when I catch little snippets from you where you're acknowledging like high arts, and I wonder how it got there. So let's go all the way back. Where the hell in Canada are you from? Where'd you grow up?
St. John's, Newfoundland, which when I was growing up was about 100,000 people. It's far eastern tip of Canada, very large rock in the middle of the North Atlantic, and populated by largely English and Irish descendants. And it's got a little bit of Canada culture, a little bit of British Isles culture. And we only joined Canada in 1949. So I grew up there. I moved away when I was 17 to go to school, but definitely formative years in Newfoundland.
How the hell did mom and dad, like, why there? Are they from there too? How far back does this go?
Yeah, born and raised. I mean, both my parents go back to England, Ireland, 3-4 generations. So, not exactly first or second generation immigrant, but first generation Newfoundlander.
Do you have any idea what brought the family to Newfoundland? Like, how'd that happen?
No, I mean, I think my ancestors, like most, were fleeing feudal England and Scotland and famine in Ireland, et cetera, and seeking fortune in the New World. And it was primarily through fishing for many years. And then we fished out all the fish stocks. And so there was a moratorium put on fishing in, I want to say, the mid-2000s. And that kind of decimated many of the communities along the coast in Newfoundland. And now a huge percentage of, I would sort of call Newfoundland blue-collar workers, actually, they fly to Alberta. They do, they work in Fort McMurray and on the rigs, et cetera, in Alberta, the refiners and upgraders, et cetera, in the oil patch out there. And then they fly back with oodles of cash and buy big pickup trucks and nice homes in Paradise or something outside St. John's. And so that's a big feature of the Newfoundland economy now.
Well, who doesn't like flying with boatloads of cash and seeing what happens? What are you into as a kid? Like, what's young Adam doing in the wilderness there?
Swimming, primarily for sports. I still swim to this day, although I took kind of a 25-year hiatus from it. I blew my eardrum in doing something stupid when I was 14. And that precluded me from spending a lot of time in the water. So I did do a little basketball, but I mostly rode the bench on the high school team. And I also played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. I have a very tight group of friends growing up, and we did everything together, but a lot of it was D&D. And I have the great fortune of being able to play to this day with my live crew, including Hofstein, Moriarty, Portnoy, Dave Nattig, my biz partner, Mike Philbrick. So it's a pretty awesome group.
That's pretty awesome. All right, you got to tell me the 14-year-old knucklehead blowing eardrum swimming story.
We used to do these overnight swimathons to raise funds for the team and for away meets, et cetera. And so you'd get sponsored and you'd sort of swim in a relay for 24 hours. So you can imagine 14, 15-year-olds, it's co-ed. So it's 3, 4 in the morning. You're probably not ultra rational. I know I wasn't. Keen to show off in front of the girls on the team. Put on my buddy's Superman t-shirt and decided I'd try some tricks off the 10-meter tower. And because I used to dive like 3, 4 3-4 years prior, before I kind of got into the swimming. And of course, I was about a foot shorter and was in the midst of my teenage, gangly, proprioceptive, formative time. So I jumped off and tried to do like a fancy whatever, like triple pike or something, and it ended up just being a complete mess. Landed on the side of my head and blew my eardrum in. And then I had a friend about a year later, after everything healed, hit me in the side of the head and had to get a second graft on my eardrum. So that sort of knocked my swimming career off kilter.
Yeah, that'll throw you for a little bit of a loop.
Yeah.
What's the D&D scene like when you're... Who exposes you to that? Who introduces you to Dungeons and Dragons?
There was a guy who came to my school in grade 6 who loaned me his version of The Hobbit, which I then stole from him, like a really old version with like a gold cover on it. I never gave it back to him in the end. I still have it on my shelf. And he organized like a basic Dungeons and Dragons game with 3 or 4 of us. And I really enjoyed it. He ended up moving on, but then there was another guy who moved to St. John's, and I befriended in grade 7, who was really into it and ended up driving the game most of the way through high school. But we played a lot of hours.
What's the friend group like? Does the friend group just emerge around the game, or did you discover it as a friend group?
I had a close friend group at the time, and we all kind of coalesced around it. Again, this kind of new guy joined our school and was in, I don't forget if it was my class or my good buddy's class, but anyways, we kind of got to know him, and he said, "Hey, yeah, I used to play a lot of D&D. I was the DM, the dungeon master back where I used to live, and, do you want to give it a try?" So we all gave it a try and really enjoyed it. So it kept going from there.
Are you still in touch with any of the childhood friend group?
Yeah, absolutely. 2 of them I'm still quite close with. One of them I remained close with for quite a while, and we've since kind of lost touch. A couple of others I lost touch with, mostly when I moved away to university. But the 2 kind of core friends that I started with in kindergarten, in some cases actually a little bit before, because we were family friends, still close friends to this day. Very
That's
grateful
awesome.
too for that. I know like a lot of people actually don't have that, and you don't make the same kinds of friends, I find, as adults as you do when you're kids. Like, you just do a bunch of goofy shit when you're kids, and you kind of learn to forgive each other and enjoy each other's foibles. And you don't have that same permission, I think, to be silly and make mistakes. As adults, the consequences are bigger, the stakes are higher, and you get all these reputational and conflicts with your kids, and you want your kids to hang out with good kids to stay out of trouble. Like, it gets complicated, right? So if you've got these kids, these friends that you made when you were very young, I think that's actually a real gift that's underappreciated.
I very, very strongly feel the same way about that. What do you think it is about the way you earn a different type of friendship with those people that you can't, like, it can only happen, to your point, when you're in middle school and willing to be goofy together. And it's like you both build your shared embarrassments and then go like, we're still cool, right? We still got to do something on Friday night.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think just as you get older, the friendships become just slightly more transactional. Like, you've got to have something to offer. Maybe whatever. Maybe you're funny, but maybe you've got a great network, or maybe you're the guy with all the great stock ideas, or whatever. But you end up sort of playing more of a role of value in your groups, where that's just not really what you're focused on as a child. It may play some part of it.
Some part of it, like the cool kid with the dungeon master skills comes into town, that gets elevated.
Absolutely.
But it brings a whole group up with them. So what about the academic interests? What are you taking to besides the side interests here? What are you taking to in school, or are you not?
Yeah. I mean, I really enjoyed school, I have to say. I mean, I didn't enjoy all my classes, but I really enjoyed learning. And I was lucky enough that my dad had saved many of his university textbooks in the house. And so I was able to, in high school, kind of go beyond the curriculum, which at the time in Newfoundland was kind of known as being a bit of a backwater in a number of dimensions, but certainly educational wise, which is why I ended up going away for my final year of high school for kind of extra prep to bring me up to the standards in, central Canada, Ontario, Quebec kind of standards. And so, I wasn't very challenged in high school until I kind of went away, but I had an opportunity to explore a lot more diverse interests. And I was really enamored with the hard sciences, with math and with physics, and, went quite a bit beyond the curriculum. I liked being a smart kid too. I liked being a smart ass. So I liked being able to go to class and have all the answers and, make the teacher look silly. And, I was a total asshole in many respects, precocious and vastly overconfident, and made the most of that. So, I struggle with that as a parent because I'm aware of Daniel Kahneman's assertion that you want to, if you've got to cultivate a bias in your children, you want it to be sort of overconfidence so that they have the confidence to take risks and go on adventures, that if you knew enough about it, then you probably wouldn't do it because it was kind of too risky. Like, who starts a business but, masochists or people who are highly overconfident, right? Like the odds are so stacked against you, right? So, in a way, the overconfidence is a necessity to kind of be able to move forward and navigate in the world and find your own niches and be confident enough to approach people and network, et cetera. But it also has its drawbacks. And, I certainly felt the consequences of those drawbacks along the way as well. So there's trade-offs.
Yeah, I'll say a few. You can't be the parent who's like, son, first you get the Superman t-shirt from your friend. Then you get up on the diving board. These textbooks, like, so you're looking at semi-dated, but not terribly dated college textbooks that your dad still had hanging around. Are these the hard science books? Are these all types of books?
These are physics and math primarily, right? Just enough to sort of allow me to constantly be a little bit ahead in class, right? From an ego standpoint, and just from a general kind of curiosity about math and physics. And I thought I wanted to go into medicine when I was in high school. And so, I was trying to get extra prepared there, maybe a little bit, but yeah, I mean, just generally curious. And I enjoyed going a little bit beyond challenging myself in those areas.
All right. And I feel like I'm obligated to ask this because similar tendencies, also the child of numerous educators in my family. So you were the kid who was like, I'm going to logically trap this teacher.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. For sure. I had absolutely no caution or reservation about being a prick. Right. So I had teachers that I think enjoyed me a little bit. I had a lot of teachers that found me very frustrating and annoying, and probably would have preferred if I wasn't in their class.
Were you just immediately aware of the lack of true status imbalance that's there between I am the teacher, I am the student, and these are the roles we're supposed to play? Why do you think you knew you could mess with the teacher?
Well, I think it was more just I liked the status of being at the top of my class, and this was a way to kind of demonstrate or assert that status. I'm not sure I had any real. I'm sure I had I remember a grade 9 science teacher that I really loved to pick on because she was just really bad and she didn't know anything about science. But for the most part, it was me being a prick to assert my dominance or my status. And not really, I'm not really trying to humiliate the teacher. It was more just self-serving.
Right. Pure ego driven. Just haha. Oh, okay. It's relatable. So is this what drives the decision to wanting to leave at 17? And is this, I'm aware that the Canadian system and the U.S. system that I'm familiar with might be a little bit different in this regard. But what's the leave the area early, go away for the preparatory year thing?
I had a French teacher. I wasn't particularly gifted in French, but I had a French teacher who took a liking to me and suggested that I start looking around at potential scholarships to schools in Ontario and Quebec. And so I ran that back through my mom and dad. They were both supportive. And we reached out. And when the schools were touring Newfoundland, I set up meetings and they encouraged me to get tested, which I did. And I ended up getting a nice scholarship to 3 schools. And then my mom toured me around the 3 schools, one of which had this gorgeous blonde girl who showed me around, Bishop's in Quebec. She took me under her wing for the day. Her name was Sarah. I won't say her last name in case I'm sure she knows. But that was ultimately the arbiter. That's what made the decision for me. Like, I want to go there with this hot chick. that's how serious
recruiting strategy.
I was taking.
They knew what they were doing. They knew what they were doing.
Absolutely, they did, for sure.
How far away? Again, the geographically challenged nature of my mind in this. That's like, are you getting on a plane to do this? Are you driving hours and hours to get that's quite the distance in my brain.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was a 3-hour flight from St. John's to Montreal, and then a 2-hour bus ride from Montreal to Sherbrooke, which is where the school was. But that was a grand adventure, man. I was up for it, and man, did we have lots of fun in Montreal and get into all kinds of fun trouble. And I have absolutely no regrets about that. I mean, academically, it was amazing for me. I actually, due to the bell curve, ended up getting like 109% in the standardized grade 12 physics exam in Newfoundland. And then I went away to school and did AP physics and still found that relatively challenging, and had to up my game in all the different subjects. I mean, there just was a very substantial gap in academic expectations between the Newfoundland curriculum and the Ontario curriculum at the time. But I think a lot of that's closed now, thankfully.
Was that transition, how jarring was it just on the academic front? And I want to ask about the social front too. How'd that go?
I mean, I think I went into a little bit overconfident, but I adapted pretty quickly. And I was able to kind of grind it out. The private school thing was like my first month or so was really rough. I got kicked around. My roommate had this friend who was a total psychopath and used to come in and beat me with like ski poles. And eventually I kind of got fed up with it and just stopped spending time there and got a group of buddies at one of the other residences, and we collectively just decided that wasn't going to happen anymore. But yeah, it was a rough transition. So I'd say that was much harder than the academic transition. Like the academic jump was meaningful, but I enjoyed that challenge, and I was up to it. And it was definitely beneficial going on to university, but it was the social transition, which was more formidable.
With the social transition, did any other friends go with you, or were you totally like, so everything's brand new. Every person, every relationship once you arrive, day one is from.
Yeah, for sure. But keep in mind, there were several other students that arrived for grade 12 on scholarship. So it was their first year. And so there was this sort of kind of group of students that had been at private school since kind of grade 6. They were all good buddies and a little cliquey. And then, but so that was definitely hard to kind of penetrate. And basically all of the other scholarship students were at this other residence, right? And the residence I was at was mostly the kids who've been there for a long time. So once I kind of got to know the other new kids, everything settled, and I had an absolutely phenomenal year, one of the absolute best years of my life. But until I found that, and it's just settling in was a little bit more frustrating.
Any D&D games amongst those friends?
Actually, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there was this sort of strange guy who was a bit of a loner, but I had a few classes with him, and he lived locally, and he really got into it and started a game on campus at the school. We had 2 or 3 people who kind of joined. It was, as you can imagine, a bit of an eclectic group. And then we used to venture over to his home on Lake Magog, I think it was, which is this is an absolutely gorgeous part of Canada. If you ever want to go visit, it's the eastern townships of Quebec, and it's absolutely glorious. Fantastic skiing. It's Laurentians skiing, sort of comparable to Vermont, but just very picturesque. Lots of beautiful lakes and cottages and what have you. So anyways, I got invited out to his house a fair number of times, and which is nice. You got the sort of home treatment. And I remember his dad used to make these Dutch baby pancakes. Are you familiar with these?
I think, are they like sheet pan pancakes, or are they?
Yeah. Like you cook them inside a cast iron pan. The Dutch make them, and he used to mix like spices and apples and whatever with them. It was absolutely, and of course, maple syrup. Like, Eastern Townships, Quebec is kind of maple syrup, global central. So I remember that. It was really special.
That sounds fantastic. And now I'm going to want one of those. I go to a fair. I try to go to a fair once a year, my wife and I, and that's like one of the things that I have to eat every single day.
Yeah. They're super yummy. Yeah. So we actually can get them at a restaurant here in Cayman too, which was a bit of a surprise.
That's a pleasant surprise.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can find a little Canada and Cayman, I guess.
Yeah.
All right.
Exactly.
So that's a 1-year gig? Like the whole time you're like, this is just 1 year and then college happens after?
Yep.
How aware were you? It's an abstract concept for a 17, 18-year-old. How aware were you that like this is just a stepping stone in this transition year? Did that factor in your brain at all, or did it not matter?
I mean, other than I knew that it was going to better prepare me for being successful in university, and I was very ambitious. Since sort of grade 6, oddly, I wanted to be a neurosurgeon. And so, these were all sort of, it's really in the back of my mind, pieces of the puzzle, right? Stepping stones to get from A to B. But, in the moment, it was a good time, right? It was an adventure. It was a challenge. I wasn't overly fixated on the fact that this is a stepping stone and I have this concrete linear plan that I'm playing out, not even remotely. This was very sort of back in the mind thing, and having some kind of vague long-term vision for how I wanted my life to turn out career-wise and otherwise kind of, day-to-day being a goofball.
Where's the neurosurgeon thing come from? Why did you decide that in 6th grade?
I did this project. It wasn't like a science project, but it was a project about science, and I chose the brain. And I just found the brain intensely fascinating, and went way beyond. And I was lucky. My mom was very proactive. You may be too young for this, but Time magazine used to have these Time Life books.
I'm not too young for those. I remember those.
No, you know those. So my mom basically subscribed to all of those. So I had in my bedroom, I had this sort of library of all of these kind of Time Life science books that I used to love to read. And I got Contact magazine that I used to just nerdy kind of, magazines. I used to absolutely love them. And so I had a lot of resources. Like if I wanted to kind of go deeper than was expected on a subject, I had a lot of resources available to go deep without having to go to the library. It was also very convenient. And I did. So I remember I went really way deeper than I needed to on the brain for this project, learned a lot about it, was utterly fascinated by it. And I also had this Alex Keaton desire to make a lot of money. So it's kind of I had this vague impression in my mind that neurosurgeons make a lot of money. I get to work on the brain. It's kind of a glamorous job. And as a like grade 7 student, I think it was kind of sufficient to be like, yeah, that's kind of where I wanted to go. And that sort of stuck with me for really until I got into university, and then I kind of scattered in a bunch of different directions, tried a bunch of silly things, and woke up a little bit about where my strengths are and what I actually like to do versus what I wish that I wanted to do. And changed my mind, but it was a pretty steady ambition through high school.
It is for university. Was it like a declare your major on your way in scenario, or was it like you'll get there and figure it out, but you were already thinking? How's that play out for you, where you know what you're going to do?
Well, I applied to get into university as an engineer. I got in as an engineer, but 2 days into Frost Week with the engineers, I realized that they just were not my people. So I switched to physics. And then about halfway through my first term, I realized that physics was too much work, like labs, et cetera. And I wanted to party, and I didn't want to spend nearly that much time in class. And so I did sort of split between physics and biology. And then going into my second year, I completely abandoned physics, much to my father's chagrin. I remember he broke a phone one time when I called to tell him that I was going to move out of physics and into drama. So I did drama biology for a term and realized that the drama people were also not my people. And anyways, I went through 2 or 3 different kind of stepwise transitions like that, and finally settled into psychology. And then ironically in psych, there were 2 streams in psych. You could either do the science stream or the arts stream. And the only difference between them was that the science stream had to take organic chemistry. And I had heard that that was just a miserable course and decided I didn't want to do that. So I did the arts psych. And I nearly didn't get through 3rd year arts psych because there was an applied stats lab. One of the things about psych, at least back then, I actually have no idea how this is carried forward, but back when I was doing my psych degree, which was 95, 96, 97, psychologists were very anxious to be thought of as proper scientists. And the way that they tried to, or one of the ways that they really tried to demonstrate that they were real scientists was through statistical rigor. And actually, to be fair, some psychologists are responsible for some really neat innovations in statistics. But I hated statistics, hated applied statistics. And there was a lab for applied statistics in my 3rd year. So I didn't go to the lab, which was worth kind of 20 marks. And I just didn't do the work. And I almost failed that applied statistics course, which you needed in order to go on to 4th year and pass the course. I see it's ironic because, of course, 10 or 12 years later, I decided I wanted to pivot to quant finance. And quant finance is really just applied statistics applied to finance, where I actually discovered an enormous love of applied statistics in the context of finance, even though I hated it in the context of psychology, because I wanted to focus on functional psych and clinical psych and not pretend I was a real scientist.
Right.
So anyways, I just kind of highlight that to show that the context for a domain of learning, I've discovered actually plays a really large role in your interest in pursuing that domain of learning. And I know that there's been a lot of progress made just in pedagogical theory and how to tie those 2 themes together to make learning more fun and effective in school.
So as you're rattling through all the majors, as you're narrowing in on art psych, and then it's developing down that track, is that ultimately what you graduate with?
Yeah.
And then who's for you, and to the degree you can go back to this awareness, who are the people in the field that you're looking at and you go, it's a different era of the influence of these people versus the post-pop psychology era of like the 2000s.
Yeah.
Who are you looking at? Like,
no, I mean, that's a totally fair question. And what it misses is that in my third year, I discovered markets, and then where I had been, and a few other things kind of pushed me away from wanting to do psych as a career. One was that I spent a term volunteering at a psych hospital and realized I really didn't want to be a psychiatrist. I kind of already moved off neurosurgeon by that point and had moved on to like psychiatrist. And I realized I didn't want to do psychiatry at all. I viewed that as just one of the most miserable possible career paths after my experience working in a psych hospital or volunteering in a psych hospital. And at the same time, I discovered markets. And so once I discovered markets, I spent all my time on markets, and the psych degree just ended up being kind of a means to the end of getting a university degree with minimal effort so that I could focus on my passion for markets. So, by the time I graduated, it was just kind of like, what's the minimal amount I need to do in psych so that I could pass and also focus all my time on my one true love, investing.
All right. Your one true love, investing. How does that bug bite you? How does that find you? Is this the kid from out of town with the D&D book and dice? Like how's this bite you?
I remember vaguely a conversation. My dad's friend was a investment advisor, and I remember having these conversations with him and becoming sort of vaguely interested in him. My dad was a dentist and my mom was a nurse, and so they were kind of totally out of touch with investing and relied entirely on advice from their advisor. So I never really grew up having conversations about markets or growing businesses or really anything in the business domain or the markets domain. And this was my first encounter with any of these concepts. And, it's not like the first conversation totally, my mind exploded. I'm like, oh, wow, I'm utterly fascinated with, but no, it was just sort of like planted a small seed. And then, when I would read the newspaper, I would then just go and flip through the stock pages and I would look at, read some of the stories, and I just started to pay attention, right?
Yeah.
And then as I was paying attention, reading the business section of the newspaper, there was an advertisement for this. This was just when internet investing was coming on stream, and TD Bank in Canada was one of the first internet investment platforms, their TD Greenline platform. And they were advertising for this trading competition to kind of promote their online trading platform, right? So that sounded interesting to me. So actually, I pointed out to a buddy, and a buddy of mine and I both entered this competition. And it was only for students, okay, for university students. But it was university students all across Canada, and a lot of university business programs use this as like a training ground as well. So they kind of registered everybody in their classes, which I didn't even realize at the time. So I just sort of entered it, and I, went about my learning about how to trade. And I traded my brain out. It was like a 3-month competition. You're given a $500,000. You got to turn it into like maximize your end of period wealth.
Sure.
You could trade options, stocks, margin, et cetera. Like, it was a pretty sophisticated platform at the time. I basically exclusively traded options just to get the leverage. I ended up turning $500,000 into like 1.2 million. I won the competition, and which was pretty fun because, the psych department, then I let them know it like was in the paper, or someone read so they put this article from the paper on the door of the business class that was also doing this, right? The psych major won this trading competition. So, that was kind of fun. And then they hosted a second one, and my buddy and I entered it together, and we said, we're just going to do the opposite of each other's trades. One of us is going to win and the other's, going to lose. So I ended up winning again, and I got my now I got my name in like national newspapers, local. I got my name in like my local hometown paper. I got all these interviews. And then I put together like a folio of like my trades, all these articles from the newspaper. And then I forwarded it to the heads of trading desks in Canada, along with like a resume and a cover letter, and said, "Here, give me a shot, right?
Come get
give
me.
me a shot.
Come
right?
look what I've done." That's amazing.
Exactly. And yeah, no one gave me the time of day, but my dad's buddy, the advisor, he had given me a job as a like intern for the previous summer. And so he made a call to the trading desk at one of the banks and said, because he knew the guy who was running it, said, "This guy's keen. He's reasonably bright. He's got some kind of intuition for markets. Why don't you give him a shot? Give him an interview." So I did end up getting an interview, which was one of the craziest days of my life, in landing a job at the trading desk. But it was, it wasn't just because I had this pedigree. I also had an intro, which I was able to kind of lever into a job, which I then promptly blew up. But, I definitely got a shot as a combination and mosaic of, a few good fortune events and also some connections, et cetera.
All right. So is that interview an ensuing job after graduation, or are you still in school when this happens?
No, after grad. Yeah.
So you graduate, that's when you put the folio and all the stuff together, and or around that time you're shipping them all out.
Yep.
I mean, you got to tell me the story now this day. Like what's this interview? What happened?
So I packed my suit in a bag and I got on the train and I go down to Toronto and I get off the train station and I'm wandering around Toronto. It's like early spring. It's cold, super windy. I finally find my way through all the tall buildings to the building where I needed to go for my interview. I asked the guy downstairs where I could change into my suit. So I changed in the suit in the basement bathroom. I left the guy with my suitcase, the security guard with my suitcase. And on the train down, I'd like scripted my pitch, right? On like cue cards. But when I got upstairs, the person who was in charge of kind of showing me around sat me down and asked me to wait. So are you familiar with the whole Bre-X gold mine fiasco that happened in 1996?
Tell the story of the Bre-X gold mine disaster, and I'm sure Kevin Weir is somewhere jumping up and down in excitement.
Yeah. Oh, Kevin knows this
Kevin
for sure.
will
I
love
know
this.
it. Yeah. But so in 94, 95, there was this massive gold deposit discovery in Indonesia, biggest of all time. One of the Canadian banks was the primary underwriter for Bre-X, and many of the brokers at that bank had gotten in ground floor at like, $10 a share or $8 a share or whatever, and had been part of many of the fundraising rounds all along the way, had made many millions of dollars as the stock had kind of soared to $300, $350. It was the biggest phenomenon for a couple of years. Then it was discovered that the geologists at the mine had been salting the assays, and that it was all fake.
Oh, God.
The stock crashed. It was halted for like 6 months while there was this huge investigation. The main geologist was like thrown out of a helicopter in Indonesia. Like a couple of people were like clearly murdered as a result. Like I said, huge investigation. So the day of my interview was the day that they reopened trading in Bre-X. So when I arrived on the trading floor, the place was an absolute mayhem, right? So I sat for kind of 2 hours in the mayhem, and before Jim, the guy who was kind of leading my interview rounds there, put me in an office and then started parading people through to talk to me, right? So I talked to the head of quant trading, I talked to the head of research, I talked to the head of institutional trading, et cetera. To a person, it was, why am I talking to you? You have zero qualifications. I've got an army of PhDs and CFAs lined up for a job on my desk. Like, why did Jim bring me in to talk to you? This is ridiculous. So, every sequential meeting was more and more demoralizing and crushing to my confidence and ego. Kind of like, call it 7 or 8 of these meetings ensued over the span of 2 or 3 hours while I kind of waited for, half an hour to an hour in between while they all had to go about their business. And then finally, Jim came into the room and said, okay, you've met with all my people. They are singularly unimpressed. Here's your shot. Why do you want to work here? Why do you think you're going to be a good fit? So I launched into this pitch that I'd prepped on the train, which was kind of like 15 or 20 minutes. And at the end, he said, okay, I'm impressed. I'm not impressed with your qualifications. I'm not impressed with your, trading competition. I'm not really impressed by any of the points that you made in your pitch, but I'm impressed that you had the gumption to put together a 20-minute pitch, that you delivered it with gusto and confidence. And, I can see a role for you on my desk. I'll give you a shot. I'll give you like a 3-month trial period, and we'll see how it goes. So, I got the offer and I started a couple months later, and, it was absolutely unbelievable. I learned more in 15 months on that desk than I learned in the subsequent 5 years in markets. But it did end with an exclamation mark, and a lot of the lessons were kind of, this is what you don't do and should never do again in your career.
Tell the story about how this comes to an end. I'll put it that way, but give us as much exclamation point as you want.
So the job on the desk had a number of dimensions, but a big part of it was coming up with ideas to share with the retail advisor network to give them reasons to trade, right? So you want to swap out of Stelco and into Algoma. You want to swap out of Royal Bank and into CIBC, whatever. Because of course, at the time, the vast majority of brokerage revenues were through commissions, through trading, right? So you needed to trade your books to generate revenue and create your income. So the desk would kind of, like Jim would get on the squawk box first in the morning and then in the afternoon and say, here are our big ideas. So I was kind of a member of the Brain Trust. There were 3 other members. So that was one part of the role of the desk. And the other part was executing large block orders. So at the time, the advisor could say, okay, yeah, I do want to, I've got my whole book, currently owns TD Bank, and I want to swap them all into CIBC, all right? But I got to call all my clients. I'm not going to reach all of them today. It's probably going to take me 3 or 4 days to reach everybody. And I can't trade anybody's stock without first calling them and, getting their permission. So they'd call and say, okay, my total book of CIBC is whatever, 50,000 shares. I want to swap that into 40,000 shares of TD. So I want you to do that for me now in one block. And I will send you tickets over the next 2 or 3 days as the orders come in, and, we'll get rid of the block. Okay. And everyone will get priced at whatever the price is that we traded it at, right? So a lot of the time, in a bull market, you're trading at a price, and then over the next few days, the market creeps higher, which was great for the advisor. They get to call and say, we're swapping out of CIBC and into TD, but we've already got a profit of a nickel on this trade or a profit of a dime on this trade. So are you good, right? So it kind of made it easier. But then we would just trade the blocks with the institutional block desk. And so we would get to, the block would be traded more efficiently, get a slightly better price, et cetera, right? So that was another part of our role. So in order to sort of generate ideas and kind of stay in the flow, and we'd get calls from advisors on our ideas, right? So I had to be versed in why we were making this call, why they should be making this switch. And so I really got to know a lot of the advisors as part of this. And we had this kind of small omnibus account that we could trade in too, just to kind of stay in the flow of the markets. And, when you've got live money at stake, you're paying attention in a way that you're not if it's all just theoretical, as you know, right? So we traded the omnibus account. First of all, I was given like $100,000 and a lot of guardrails, and I made some money because it was a bull market. And once I made a little bit of money, then the guardrails were loosened and the size of my allocation also went up, right? So I kept making money and the guardrails came off and the size of my allocation continued to go higher. I kept making more money and making more money. And I eventually kind of turned the $2 million omnibus account into about $8 million, trading like way out of the money options on companies that were coming into earnings. And it was just that time in the market. It was like mid 98 when you could throw darts at high beta tech stocks coming into earnings and know they were going to jump kind of 20%. But the options were just not pricing in that level of volatility. And so you could just make these huge overnight gains. And there were also like Canadian bank mergers. And so, I remember one time, I think it was RBC was coming in to buy TD, and CIBC, there was speculation CIBC was going to come in and buy BMO. I forget what the exact banks were, but I said, we should buy BMO at the open large because it's going to jump on speculation. So anyways, we made this massive win on that. I remember they carried me around. We had this inflatable Burger King crown.
Sure.
And I remember the guys put the crown on my head and like carried me around because I made the desk like $600,000 on this BMO pass, right? So you can imagine the ego of this 22-year-old who had made this massive, you could do no wrong, made this massive amount of money on, these super speculative trades. Really, this is just like betting with leverage in a bull market and having a few really big opportunities, kind of obvious things be presented to you that just happen to work out. But the ego just was massive. And so I just kept taking more and more risk and not really having any sense of risk management or what could happen. And I just was at maximum risk coming into the Thai baht, long-term capital management crisis in August, September, October 1998. And, just taking the desk's $8 million and basically like wiping it out, taking way too much risk. The management of the desk were totally irresponsible. Like the whole thing was just a fiasco. And at the end of it, I got walked out the door. Like, there's no way you should have been given this much capital to allocate. There's no way you should have been allowed to trade with this much leverage and this much risk. My boss also got walked out at the same time, but it was just like a catastrophic, highly emotionally salient lesson very early on in my career. It's one of these things like I kind of wish it had never happened, but if it's going to happen, you want it to happen in like your first 15 months when the damage you could do is very small, right? And you're learning an acutely, highly salient lesson when, this is a nanoscopic dent to the bank's overall profitability, but still a very, very hard lesson for me that I ended up really taking to heart. So, but obviously not the way I wanted that stay on the trading desk to end.
How aware were you of sort of the macro causes of you getting annihilated there versus how much risk you were taking? Like how hard did this beat you up?
Not aware at all. Not aware at all. Like, I thought it was kind of just bad luck. I blamed everyone else. I blamed poor supervision, which to an extent was legitimate.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was the lesson came later, right? I was mostly flailing around looking for others to blame at the time. And it was over sort of the subsequent few years that I came to appreciate my role in that and the size of that lesson and the value of it. And I remember I was asked to take my CFA level 1 in June of 1998. And I remember thinking, this is such bullshit. Like, I'm clearly a mega star. Like, why do I need to learn all these market mechanics and all this stupid accounting? But also, whatever, I'll go take it. Like, no brainer. I'll just go. So I remember I took a week off before the CFA exam, thinking I'll just start then, right? And went in to take it, didn't know an answer on the test. Obviously failed profoundly. And I came back to it, 3 or 4 years later, and took it very, very, very seriously. But I mean, that's the level of hubris that I was operating at the time.
You didn't wear your Burger King crown to the
I didn't.
One, did you? Okay.
I didn't, though it wouldn't have surprised me if I was tempted.
Yeah. Might have been in the back of your head somewhere with your whatever the financial calculator du jour of the day was.
Exactly.
All right. So the ego, how long does it take you after that, getting walked out of the job do you have to go home for a while and recover? What's the bounce back look like from this?
Yeah. I mean, I tried to get hired on in an analogous role at
Right.
A couple of the other banks, but there was just no way. I mean, First of all, they were coming out of that 98 crisis and they weren't really looking to hire. Plus all they had to do was make a call into, my desk to realize that, first of all, my immediate supervisor had been walked out with me. It was no longer there. It's a pretty small street in Toronto. So it took one call for them to get the full story. And so I was kind of blacklisted for a little while. So I went back to school and I went back and learned a program. And then I worked at IBM for a while. I worked at an internet startup for a while. I never really worked in a programming role. I worked in an account management role where I was kind of an intermediary between the client side dealing with the businesses and the tech team. So helping to scope the project and communicate changes in scoping and communicate challenges that the tech team was having back to the client, rescope, reprice, all that kind of stuff, right? And then in the 2000 tech crash, the company I was working at went out of business. My wife was working at Boston Consulting Group and their internet group, which had gone from 0 to 240 people. Toronto was a major cluster for their e-commerce group. That shrunk right down to 12 people by late 2000. So we were both okay, what are we going to do? It's recession. So we went to Thailand for a couple of years, taught at this English language Thai school. I taught math and physics to 9, 10, 11, and 12 grade 9, 10, 11, 12 English immersion students in Thailand. And while I was there, I started up my CFA level 1 again. I actually wrote my CFA level 1 in Singapore. But I knew I wanted to get back into finance, and I knew I had to kind of do it a bit more the traditional way of, getting my qualifications, et cetera. So yeah, that's what we ended up doing. I think we'd still be in Thailand to this day. We absolutely loved it, except for my wife wanted to come home and do a teaching degree, which she did. So we moved back to Ottawa. She completed her teaching degree, and I got back into finance.
Where along the journey, where do you and your wife meet?
We met in university. Third year.
So during that same third year when all the stuff was getting interesting, what was your major in school? Did you cross
Classics, classical studies.
Okay.
So we're very, let's say we're very complementary to each other, both emotionally and in terms of our latent talents and our interests, et cetera. There's not a huge amount of overlap, which is great. We work great as a team.
Here's the shared values and complementary skills. What's she say when you're 22 and getting walked off the trading desk? Is the compliment helping you? I'm not looking for marriage trauma.
Well, I mean, originally it was you moron, right? But in a loving, supportive way.
Yeah, right.
And eventually it was, because I went through a bit of a depression. Like, what am I going to do? Like, just a total existential crisis. So it took me kind of 6-8 months of lying in bed reading. I remember I read the Robert Jordan series, the Eye of the World series, the second time during when I was on sabbatical, let's say, for that 6 to 8 months. So it took me kind of 6 to 8 months to get back on my feet. So she was very patient and encouraging, and eventually, between us, gave me the energy and urgency to go back and find a new path, at least for the meantime.
When you guys make actually, I'm going to regret if I don't ask it. The Thai, like, we're going to go to Thailand and teach question. Is that some crazy mutual, how does that get hatched to you? It's clearly a mutual decision to go and both commit to this path. Where the hell does that come from?
Yeah, we were just kind of in limbo, and I didn't want to just, grind looking for work in a shitty job market. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do either. And neither did she. And
okay,
I guess through the grapevine, we had heard of some of my parents' friends who were like retired teachers in Newfoundland, who had moved to Thailand and were teaching at this school and having a great time. And actually, I recall now, we sort of had the idea that we wanted to do this. Oh, okay, great. We want to travel and teach English. And so then, speaking again of just like hubris, I remember reaching out not just to the school that we had contacts in Thailand, but to like universities and other like high schools in developed countries to teach English. Like, neither of us
just going direct. It's just like, hey, you know what you guys need?
Neither of us had had ESL degrees or qualifications or like teaching diplomas. It was just like, hey, this prominent university in Istanbul, we'd love to come and teach at your university. And I remember getting this letter back from, I forget which like department at this like major university in Istanbul, going, I don't know what you think we do here, but like, we're a major international university program. Like, we don't need some unqualified people to come and teach us English. Like, all of our PhD students are fluent in English. We take English in school. Like, just really kind of put us in our place, right?
Somebody enjoyed that strongly worded letter to you.
Totally, yes. Yeah. But we did eventually kind of reach out to this group in Thailand who vouched for us. And, the standards were right. We were teaching kind of 7, 8, 9 English immersion. They didn't have access to enough qualified teachers. We were keen and energized by this opportunity and had some people vouch for us. And it ended up working out great. It was a very nascent program. We ended up actually building the curriculum for the because the kids had only gone through 8 years of this immersion program. It was very new, and they had led the program. So each new year, you had to build out the full curriculum for the next year, right? So I ended up building the curriculum for like grade 9 math and grade 9 science and stuff, which was a really cool project. And we mostly just modeled it after the Canadian grade 8 and grade 9 curriculum, but we had to go and like source text. Anyways, that was kind of a fun project. But a lot of lessons, and just enjoyed living in Asia. Just so unbelievably, just the energy and the Buddhist culture that really, really resonated. Plus, you live in this incredible expat community of other young people with adventurous spirits from New Zealand and Australia and South Africa and the UK and Europe and the States. And so that whole thing is also really cool at that age. So, I would highly recommend that. I don't know if the opportunity set is the same as it was then. I'm sure you've got to have much better qualifications to do those types of jobs now. But yeah, couldn't recommend it highly enough.
Coming back, so you said it was because your wife wanted to pursue a degree and you wanted a way back in, but it sounds like she was the dominant factor to saying, teaching, done, let's go. Is that the way that went, kind of? Like she was ready to move on and you were ready to figure out the next step?
Yeah, I mean, I was networking in Bangkok for roles at finance firms, at investment companies, and would have been very happy to stay. But she wanted to do teaching, and she also, I think, had the intuition that it would have been challenging to start a family in Bangkok, which, in retrospect, at the time would certainly have been more challenging, especially without any sort of family support, et cetera. As a 25 or 26-year-old man, I had no intuitions about what is required just to start and manage a
Pack
family.
that Burger King crown somewhere.
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking?
Exactly. So my wife clearly did. And so, we wanted to go back and also start a family while she was doing her teaching degree, which we did very quickly after coming back to Canada. But yeah, I mean, I definitely would have stuck around in Bangkok, if I hadn't known all of the other complications that would have been required to realize the other dimensions of ambitions that I had and that we shared together, which, yeah, like I said, would have been more complicated if we hadn't come back to Canada at that time, I think.
So you come back and you're off on the CFA path. Do you find a job right away? Do you go for a completely different entry level into finance, quote unquote, at this point? Or do you go back to a trading desk? How's that happen?
I did my second level CFA exam, passed that, and very soon after I arrived home, back in Canada, and started looking for work because we were in Ottawa at the time, and there was a fairly narrow opportunity set for finance jobs in Ottawa. I wanted to be in investing. I didn't want to be in sort of commercial banking or like you could go to work at the Business Development Corporation, funding new businesses or funding international trade deals, that sort of thing. Wasn't really my jam. Wanted to be in investing. I did explore opportunities there, but none of them really were where I wanted to be. And I wasn't well qualified for them, candidly. So I ended up looking for work at the advisory firms, like as an investment advisor. And I ended up getting hired onto the training program at one of the big Canadian banks. And so I went through sort of the advisor training program, and which was super fun and like definitely like peak experience. And then built my own, advisory book. Now I had just tremendous luck. On my honeymoon, my wife and I had met on the bus from the plane to the resort. We had met this other couple flying in from Canada, and we had hit it off. We kind of got together for drinks soon after we arrived at the resort. We ended up really hitting it off and spending basically all our waking hours together on our honeymoon. And it turns out that he was from a very wealthy family in Western Canada. And so this is a bit of a convoluted story. He ended up inviting me to go out there before we went to Thailand to trade a crazy options book with a small sliver of his family's wealth. And I had enough sense at the time to say, no, that's a disaster waiting to happen. And so we went a different way. We went to Thailand and I did the CFA, et cetera. When I got back to Canada and got all my qualifications sorted and got my business up and running, I reached back out, and he invited me out to meet with the family and present my solution. And we, through sort of 2 or 3 back and forths, they agreed to hand over their entire estate to my management. Now, as a kind of a rookie advisor, I was under the wing of a senior portfolio manager at the time. And so we kind of co-presented a solution, and they guided my hand in the management of that book of business for the first year or so. But the family ended up being very frustrated with the oversight of this other senior portfolio manager, and eventually they agitated, and I was granted permission to just oversee the book myself. And then they wanted, because it was still at the time when I wasn't able to get licensed as a discretionary portfolio manager, but that was the role I wanted to play. And they didn't want me having to call all the time for every change I was making in the portfolio. But the bank had this rule that you needed 5 years experience plus your CFA plus a few other items in order to get your discretionary license, which is, in retrospect, a prudent rule. But I didn't want any part of that. The client didn't want to suffer those rules, since the actual securities regulations allowed me to get my discretionary license with the qualifications that I already had. So I undertook to move my book of business to a new firm. And we decided at the time we would rather move to Toronto, where the opportunity set was just much larger. Obviously the center of financial services and advisory and asset management, et cetera. So we kind of moved from Ottawa to Toronto at that time. I started at a new firm as a discretionary portfolio manager, and moved forward with that client from there. And that's where I ended up meeting my business partner, Mike Philbrick, in 2007, who's, co-founder of Resolve Asset Management.
All right. How do you meet Mike Philbrick in 2007? And I'm extra sensitive to this is in 2007 and just how this evolves.
Yeah, sure. So Mike was the branch manager, and he had been the branch manager at this is the flagship downtown Toronto branch for GMP Securities, Griffiths McBurney Securities, and had been, almost singularly responsible for growing this branch from basically nothing to a multi-billion-dollar branch with a couple dozen very senior advisors with very large books of business. And as branch manager, he had been allocated like extra admin support. And I had moved with this very small, tight book of business. I run a discretionary, portfolio management business, which was unusual at the time, but it didn't have a lot of administrative overhead. And I hadn't brought my admin assistant with me from Ottawa. So Mike said, well, look, why don't you just have a share of my admin team to help you manage your own business for a time. And he moved me in right next to, my office was right next to his office, so that I could be right outside the door from the admin team. And so we had just lots of opportunities to interact. He was not very impressed with me off the bat. In fact, when I did part of my interview process with him and with the other management team at Richardson, he was like, "Yeah, I don't think he's going to be a right fit." But it ended up that we were very complementary in skill sets, right? He was a very big personality, leader of men, had everybody's attention, highly charismatic, also, very, very smart, just a very powerful intuition for markets. And we ended up getting in like all kinds of debates, discussions, points of friction on whatever, all sorts of elements of markets and investing and growing businesses, et cetera. And, it kind of came to pass, I guess, that it made sense for us to team up. I had my CFA and some of the other elements that allowed me to get my discretionary license. He had other qualifications that allowed him to be kind of branch manager, and from a regulatory standpoint, act as CEO, CCO. And so it kind of made sense for us to come together for a bunch of different reasons, which we did. So we merged our book in early 2009, I think. And then there was a major merger. There was some friction where GMP at the time ended up not giving Mike the share of economics that he had been promised. And so there was some friction there. And so we decided to move our business to this new firm that had kind of just come into Canada. They were very aggressively recruiting. And we also wanted to kind of transform our business from a traditional advisory business into a kind of a hybrid of advisory plus asset management. And this new firm, as they were recruiting us, said, first of all, we'll fund the transition of your business in a very attractive way, but we'll also fund the setup of a new asset management arm of this new business that we're building in Canada, and you guys can run it, and your fund will be kind of our flagship fund, right? So we ended up transferring to this new bank. This was Macquarie Bank from Australia, who had kind of bought into the Canadian advisory space. But their ultimate goal was to set up as a tier 1 bank in Canada. And so they kind of spent 2 years with applications getting set up as a tier 1 bank. And that was eventually rejected. And then when that was rejected, the whole business case for being in Canada was no longer viable. So they exited and sold the businesses again. So, Mike and I had been through this transition a couple of times. So we approached this new business and said, look, we don't want to go through this again. Our intention was always kind of launch as an independent business. So here's our plan. Do you guys kind of want to buy into this business and support our exit? Or do you want us to just kind of go through this the hard way for all of us and exit, without your blessing? So they blessed it and took a bit of an ownership stake through peripheral means in the short term, which they ended up kind of selling down, but facilitated our exit. But I should mention along the way, in 2011, when we moved to Macquarie Bank, that's when Mike and I met Rodrigo, our other business partner.
Okay.
And he folded into Resolve like within a month of us joining
So Rodrigo
Macquarie.
comes right around that time. And does he just magically appear? Because I didn't know where that came from.
I mean, Rodrigo had been very successful building his own book of business, had his own great intuitions for markets, had embraced a lot of like similar philosophies that Mike and I had already begun to espouse, like systematic decision-making, focus on asset allocation. Rodrigo had already been allocating to managed future strategies, even through the '08 financial crisis. So had nice kind of live validation of that approach, where Mike and I had kind of come to that, the hard way through 2007. But there was kind of a shared understanding of systematic methods, diversification away from just your typical kind of 60-40. And again, just like the complementary skill sets, right? Rodrigo had a very strong intuition and understanding of markets and investing, but also a real passion for business development, networking, just like building a book of business, right? So now you had like the 3 legs of the stool, right? I did a little bit more of a focus on building and supervising the investment strategies. Mike built the business, built the team, managed the team, also very active on the investment side and guidance on how the strategies should be built and deployed and risk managed. Rodrigo, again, a heavy hand in the investment and risk management, but then spearheaded the business development side of the business. And, to a very large extent, that kind of division of labor with the same kind of overlap continues to this day.
It's amazing how quickly those pieces kind of came together at the back end of that deal.
Yeah.
The 3 of you look back on that. How do you see that as a catalyst in hindsight, just bringing the 3 of you together?
There's no way really it could have worked without all of us. And, Rodrigo especially has just really grown into the role. He started out as kind of focused on business development, but like now he's the president, and he's very much earned his way into that role with just a great strategic focus. He gets stuff done. He's an excellent manager. Fantastic at networking at very senior levels, and a great investment intuition too. But like it's been amazing just to see the other members of the leadership team grow and evolve and learn and adapt along the way to make Resolve the what it is, right? And of course, along the way we partnered with other firms, like we partnered with Corey Hofstein on this return stacking venture, which has been, a success wildly beyond what I might have expected in the beginning. But, Rodrigo and Mike and Corey had the vision for this right from the start, while I sort of understood and was a huge supporter of the investment approach philosophically. I was a little bit more skeptical of our ability to get the message out and build a business around it. I was wrong. It's been a fantastic growth opportunity for me as I've sort of seen these guys flourish and the business flourish, which has been amazing. It was, it couldn't have happened without Mike's meticulous attention to the operating side of the business, vision to make the business an international presence by, excavating it from Canada to Cayman so that we could more easily build out the international segment of the business and focus more on the asset management side. Like, it really took all the brains and also some key members of the Resolve team that came on a little bit later. Andrew, Nick, Jason, Cheryl, Richard, and there's a slew of other people on the support side that it's just like, we couldn't have done it without the whole team, right? But it's been cool to watch everybody evolve and see what this thing grew into over time.
The last question on this, and I'm taking you some notes. The book, I feel like the book is when the adaptive, get the title right for me. What's the name of the book?
Adaptive Asset Allocation. I think it's Adaptive Global Portfolios to Thrive in Good Markets and Bad. It's been a while. That came out in 2015, and I started to write that in 2014. That went through a couple of hiccups. Actually, I lost
Do tell.
the first draft of that, actually. So I had to almost rewrite that from scratch.
like it just was gone one morning, or left it on a train?
Yeah, so another fun story. So I was kind of struggling to focus on it, and I had this buddy, actually who was the DM of my high school DM crew, who was on this project. He was selling real estate in this new resort in Belize. So he invited me down, hoping probably that I would see an investment opportunity for my clients or something like that. But he invited me down to stay there for a week and, see the property, et cetera. And I said, well, all right, I'll come down. And while I'm there, it'll give me a chance to kind of focus on my book. When I got down there, there was effectively no internet at the place. So I tried to kind of sync my book, email versions of my book to my wife or to people as backup while I was there, because there was no other easy backup strategies at the time. It was kind of pre-Dropbox, or maybe Dropbox around, but we weren't using it. Anyway, the whole draft was basically on my laptop. And while I was down there, the guys were always drinking, go to the staff party, and the guys always drank this amazing rum. And so as I was leaving, I picked up a bottle of this rum at duty free.
Right. I already know where this is going.
I had to go through Miami airport, it was Belize, Miami, Toronto. So I had to go through Miami airport to get to, it actually isn't maybe going where you think it's going. To get to Toronto. And of course, it was post 2001. So you got to, the whole security, you can't bring fluids through, right? So I get to Miami. I'd already checked my bag. I had this carry-on, and it had this bottle of rum in it, along with my laptop and my iPad and headphones, whatever. So I realized, oh shit, I can't take this bottle of rum with me through security. So I check my bag in Miami to go on to Toronto, and I check, the bottle of rum, my laptop, everything except I take my iPad and my headphones. I'll just listen to watch a movie or whatever on the playback. I get to Toronto, and someone has stolen my laptop out of my bag.
So you stole the bottle of rum? But they took the
The
laptop.
bottle of rum was there. Laptop gone.
Oh, that's cruel.
So that was super discouraging. And it took me like 6 months to get enough energy back to start working on that book again. But yeah, eventually I cranked it out, the rest of it, and got it published.
I asked that because I think somewhere around the book is probably the first time that I run into your work. And I go, okay, I really like this way of thinking. It's really informative. It's really useful for me professionally. And then it was the bubbling up of like that and the podcast stuff and Gestalt U and like everything. Did you see that as just all, was it just pure marketing to you, or was it, I want to be able to document and write this stuff down?
It started out as I think we've got something really special, and I want to keep in mind, I've been writing the Gestalt U blog starting in early 2009, right? And a lot of that was me documenting my learning journey. So my background's not in quant finance. I kind of learned it myself, right? By reading white papers. I learned the R programming language, and, like just slowly over time, I kind of learned to experiment and build strategies and test them. And, went from kind of simple to more robust and complex, but I documented a lot of this journey on the Gestalt U blog. So the vision originally with the book was like, can I just find a coherent ordering for these blog articles and then add chapters in between to kind of segue or synthesize concepts, etc. So that's kind of what I started doing, and I thought it would be a great way to kind of document the journey and document the thinking, etc. The editing process is just miserable. Like it actually is just a miserable effort. Every day that you go into it is like, it sucks. And so, I don't think I had enough energy from just the willingness to kind of document my journey to see that through. It was the extra kind of encouragement and I guess kicks in the ass along the way from Mike and Rodrigo, et cetera. Like, actually, this is going to be transformative for marketing, for credibility purposes, et cetera. Help us build the business. That definitely was key to getting it over the hump and getting it out and published. Like, there's just a huge amount of non-writing, non-creative work that goes into building the book. I really enjoyed the creative stuff and found the other efforts to be just excruciating. So it was the whole team kind of coming together to get that done.
That answers the question about where's the follow-up book.
Yeah, there's been talk of, it would actually be a lot easier now with AI.
Oh, right. Yeah.
To build one. And, it's funny because I actually did write a script to iteratively create a book on return stacking that kind of synthesized a lot of the blog articles and white papers and other kind of supporting material. And, I thought it was all right, but Corey's standards are higher than mine, I guess. So it's still sitting on the shelf.
Well, it's okay. Some things can sit on the shelf. Just don't put it in a laptop only.
Yes.
Next to a bottle of rum on a
exactly.
plane. I took a couple of notes while you were talking. I got some stuff I want to ask you about. And
All right.
first and foremost, I have to go to this whole, just the relationships with teachers. The ninth grade science teacher, and picking on the teacher is hysterical. But this French teacher who liked you, and how that happened, who is this person? What did they see in you if you weren't that good of a French student? What was that?
Matt, it's a mystery. And, I remember her to this day. Her name was Miss Pike. I won't say her first name just so that I guess stay out of trouble. But she was also really pretty. And like everyone kind of had the hots for her. And to this day, I don't know why she was the one who maybe she was sort of charged at school with being on a bit of a scouting mission for people to like me, who maybe had what it took to maybe it was worthwhile for them to try and encourage me to go on and pursue this kind of challenge. But Yeah, there's nothing. I mean, later on, I had other people kind of chime in and say, "This is a good idea for you." Like I pinged 2 or 3 other teachers about the idea, and they were really supportive. But yeah, Miss Pike, she was the one. I don't know why.
That's maybe even more amazing to not know why, but just know what the influence of that little subtle gesture was.
For sure.
When you were talking about being this brief stint as a drama student, like plays, monologues, what did the thespian Adam Butler get into?
I had been in the play Oliver. I played Mr. Bumble in the play Oliver in grade 12 in high school. And aside from the fact that I really enjoyed the singing and the acting, I'm not sure how good I was, but I had a lot of fun with it. But also the whole idea of being part of the play and being part of the cast and the cast parties. And like, it's actually a really close social experience. Like you just get really tight with the other people in the play, spend a lot of hours together, and you're in, vulnerable spots together, kind of making a fool of yourself all together, right? And so I really enjoyed that. I think it was a big part of my motivation to try drama, but university drama, everyone took it a lot more seriously. And there's an element of just kind of like self-congratulatory, nature of that whole thespian community that just didn't resonate with me. I'm far more comfortable on a trading floor where we're all kicking the shit out of each other all the time. But like, that constant oozing support and positivity, this wasn't really my jam. So, just like the engineers were kind of a bit too nerdy, had never gone to parties in high school. And I just, I wasn't ready for that. This thespian, constant like support group attitude really didn't connect with me either. So yeah, just like a bunch of failed experiments, really. Like I just tried a bunch of things, didn't really know where I wanted to be.
All right, this is perfect because I also just made a note of this, and now you're really hitting this. You said something about the context for the domain of learning and just how much that matters. There's an experiment quality of this too, like understanding all these different domains exist and you're not a fit. Contextualize that for me.
I just really have always loved to learn. Like ChatGPT for me now has like, I would be holed up in my office 24/7 with ChatGPT, just asking questions, just banging ideas off chat, learning, exploring, all kinds of domains that I'd never have any interest in doing if I couldn't explore them in the way that I can now, and in frames and contexts that make sense to me, right? Like, I think to an extent you need to have an anchor experientially, or there needs to be something within you that gives you an innate passion or interest to want to be curious. And like, as you learn things, it really helps to have some sort of basic scaffolding so you can hang new ideas on them, right? And so like, I think all that kind of fits together. And I've also, like, one of the really formative books for me is the book, oh my God, I'm going to forget it now. It's not Nudge. Oh, it's called Range by Range. So it's
Range is great.
Yeah, it's this book Range by David Epstein.
Yeah, that's an awesome book.
Yeah, right. You're familiar with it?
The 2 tennis pros are at the beginning, or and it's like
Federer.
Yeah, wasn't it Tiger Woods versus Federer at the beginning, where it's like, here's what the parent who does this versus Federer, like his both of his parents like teach, and he like doesn't even play until he's like 12 or something.
Yeah, his mom won't let him play full time. He's got to try all these other sports. Yeah, exactly.
I love that book.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you nailed it. I mean, the whole book is amazing, and actually I happened to stumble on it early enough in my parenting journey for it to have a really, I think, big impact on my approach to parenting. But one of the big chapters that stood out for me was the chapter where they went through all the experiments that they did at West Point, and how students are not very good at identifying the teachers that actually do the best job in crystallizing concepts so that they're able to go on to further study in those domains and be successful. And in fact, they're the teachers that the students rate most highly end up being the worst in terms of how the students are able to go on and complete further work in that domain. But also it was about how, interleaving and needing to approach the learning in domains in a variety of different contexts, approach them from different angles. So like all of that was really, really formative as well. So that actually catalyzed a bit of a journey for me in terms of, because I wanted to know how to best kind of prepare my children. So then I went on a journey into pedagogical techniques, et cetera. And now, I don't know if you listened to the most recent podcast that Patrick O'Shaughnessy did with one of the founders of Alpha School, but they spend a long time on how they use AI in order to sort of dynamically sculpt lesson plans to leverage the child's areas of interest, right? So if you're going to learn a complex topic, but you're really into baseball, well, if you're going to learn statistics, you're going to learn about Moneyball, right? Because it's kind of the intersection of your baseball interest and your statistics domain knowledge that we're going to incept you with, right? So I just think there's something just unbelievably powerful in mixing interests and context with building domain knowledge.
I love that on probably too many levels. I got one more for you. The pitch to Jim, and this is a recurring theme too, where you do the interview and they're just wholly unimpressed with you. And they're telling you this, but there's something about the gumption, and maybe there's a parenting lesson in this. What is it about gumption, gusto, and confidence is what you said before. What is it?
I think honestly, it's just like, it's surface area, right? Like you just have to touch enough potential opportunities that something clicks, right? And in order to have the urgency or energy to go and do that, it requires just like, again, this kind of overdeveloped sense of confidence. Like all of the opportunities that I have gotten in my life have come from me just putting myself out there in the strangest ways. Like I got the job at this internet company by going with my resume and sitting in their head office and asking to talk to the CEO, just like showing up and, being told, well, no, like the CEO's he's got meetings all day. I'm like,
you might not become an ESL teacher in an Istanbul college, but you might get in an internet startup with these tactics.
Yeah, exactly. Another example, right? But like, I'm willing to just wait here. Like, does the CEO drink coffee? Does he go for coffee? I'll just wait and catch him on his way out. And I did. And like, he invited me in to chat, like it was the same thing at IBM. So it's just, putting yourself out there. And I try to encourage my kids in this way, but I think a lot of it's also how you're wired. I think there's something a little wrong with my brain too. Like I maybe have this kind of, this blindness, right? That blinds me to potential embarrassment or something, right? And so I'm able to go and put myself out there in certain ways. I don't know. There's some combination of overconfidence and certain blindnesses that allow me to go and do this stuff that I think some of it you can implant and some of it's just kind of innate. And it also has downsides in certain ways and like has upsides in other ways. And you kind of have to make the best of the advantages and try to mediate the disadvantages to the greatest extent possible. I don't know.
Yeah. And you put the people around you to help you deal with that stuff so they don't get you into more trouble.
If they could, if they can tolerate my, idiosyncrasies and the downsides, and we all end up being sufficiently complementary, then, I just think you're unbelievably fortunate if you find a group of people like that in your life and you're mutually reinforcing and you can jump on the boat together and pull the oars in your own way and make progress. It's pretty phenomenal.
Pretty phenomenal indeed. Adam Butler, People want to find you. They want to bug you on the internet. Where should they look you up these days?
I am at GestaltU on Twitter, though I'm on hiatus from Twitter at the moment. Which we could get into if you wanted. But I'm also just at adam.butler at investresolve.com or at investresolve.com, like on the web, returnstack.com, returnstacketfs.com. So there's lots of different places you can find me or find the things that I've contributed to over the years and the things that my partners and I have contributed to. And you're welcome to reach out. Happy to answer questions or indulge in, all kinds of different side quests.
Here's to the side quests. Hit him up with your D&D questions too. He wants all of them. Rest assured. Adam Butler, I'm happy to say you're truly an intentional investor. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for all the great questions, Matt. Holy crap, how to move the conversation forward. That was amazing.
Fantastic. Epsilon Theory YouTube. This is The Intentional Investor. Like, subscribe, all the things below, and we are out.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe wherever you're watching The Intentional Investor so more people can find our show. You can follow Matt directly at cultishcreative.com or at cultishcreative on Twitter. For more great content at the intersection of investing and life, check out epsilontheory.com or at Epsilon Theory on Twitter.